for the theatre poster, have Photoshop open, and the first thing you're going to do is, I'm in Photoshop. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is make a new document. So File, New, make sure it's Print, and you can go to the presets A3, but then you're just adding a little bit extra for what's going to be the bleed in the final document in InDesign. So we need to add another 3, so that'll be 300 millimeters by 423. That just gives us a little bit of overlap for when we send something to the printer. It should always stay in pixels per inch, not pixels centimetre. Don't ever use that, it's cinematic. RGB colour is fine. We usually work in RGB rather than CMYK and convert to CMYK later. Everything else is fine, don't need to change anything else there. And then we just say create, making sure it is print. And when you hit that print selection, you'll automatically get a print resolution document. So for commercial printing, it does need to be that 300 pixels per inch. Anything less than that and won't be acceptable for commercial printing. So then you just hit create. And now we're going to bring in our images. So we just need to go File, Place. You can do either embedded or place linked. Usually we want to stay linked to our original imagery to begin with.
Place embedded?
Place embedded is also fine, yeah?
Or linked.
Or linked, yeah. So, and then just place it. In this instance, you can see that it actually needs to be rotated. So I'm going to rotate it by dragging and holding the Shift key down, which just means I'll get a perfect horizontal transformation. Now at this point, it's not yet placed, and this is a good time to drag it up and resize it because it keeps all of the information, so it's not going to degrade the image. So it's a good idea to do any major resizing here, but you will be able to resize it again afterwards if you need to. So once you've got that in, you hit the return key to apply it, and you can see that now it's there, and you can see it's got that little link icon, and that's great because it means I could double click on it and I would open that original image back in another. I can open it in Photoshop and edit it later. So sometimes, particularly with a logo, for example, if you're placing it in a Photoshop document, you don't want to rasterize it and you want to keep the link back to the original, then you wouldn't want to do what we're about to do, which is to rasterize it, because there's a lot of things we can't do to it. For example, I can't use these selection tools properly until this is actually rasterized. So you go to the layer menu, rasterize, smart object. Now you can see it's pixels that I can actually edit, and the first thing I want to do is remove the background. So if you've got a good contrast between the foreground and the background, so you can see this has got a really good edge, so this one's going to be easy to drag over with the object selection tool. I can drag over the whole thing, and you can see it's done a pretty good job, but if I hit delete now, it's going to delete the object, which is not what we want. So we've got to do one more thing, which is to go to the select menu and go inverse. So we're selecting the opposite of the object, which is the background in this case. So select inverse, it's going to delete everything else. I'll just turn off that background layer so you can see what we're doing. So we want to delete that background. Now that's gone. And you can see that I've still got what's called an active selection. We call them crawling ants. So the quick shortcut is Command D to deselect. So you're just killing that selection. So now you can move it around using the Move tool. You can still, and you can see I've got a little bit of extra stuff there. I can just use the Square Selection tool to grab that and just delete, and Command D again. So I can continue moving it around. around, and if it's still not the right size, I can go back to the edit menu and go transform and scale it up to a better position. You can see I've still got a little bit on that side I want to get rid of. And whenever you do an action, you need to hit the return key to apply it. So I'm going to delete that as well.
Excuse me, I just missed my image is still linked.
Yeah, so you didn't rasterize it.
No.
So I'll show you with the next one. I'll repeat that process.
Thank you.
So once we've got it in there, we get it in position. If it's not the right size, don't worry. You've got the option of making sure you're on the layer you want to affect. Edit, transform, and you can see you can scale it at any time. It's just when you first bring it in, it is a good idea to do any major scaling because you're keeping all the details. And you can distort it. So you do have other tools in the transform you can distort it with. So the next one, so I'm going to bring it in again and just demonstrate that again. So we're going to place link or place embedded. Go and get your next thing. So I'm going to go and get this one and I'm going to go place. It comes in and scale it if necessary at this point. Otherwise, just hit the return key to place it, and then you can see it's got that smart object icon which links us back to the original. Like I said, sometimes we want to be able to go back and edit something, the original, especially something like a logo. You want to open it back in Illustrator. That link would allow you to do that. So let's go edit. Let's go and rasterize it because we can't do much with it until we do that. So that's under the layer menu. So find the layer menu, rasterize, smart object. And you can see that icon disappears and now I can remove that background. So again, I've got a range of tools. Depending on the problems that your particular image poses, the magic wand tool can be quite good because it just selects one colour, but be careful what you click on. You can see that tolerance, there's a tolerance setting for the magic wand tool. So basically the magic wand selects by colour. So a tolerance of 200, you can see it's getting bits of the image, so that tolerance is way too big. So if I put it back down to 30, that will mean it'll probably only get the white that I'm clicking on. So the magic wand tool is really great for selecting by a colour. And now I've got everything I wanted there. Select the background, Command D, deselect. And again, use the move tool to get things in position. And then the last one I'm going to place, I'll do it all again. I'm going to go File, Place Linked or Place Embedded, either's fine. And I want the splatter. So I'm going to bring her splatter in. And this one really needs to be scaled up quite a bit, and it's much better to do it at this point before I've actually placed it. Like I said, that'll preserve a lot more of the image quality. I'm going to hit return to apply it. You can see it's a smart object. I need to go layer, rasterize, smart object. Okay, now we've got a problem because even if I try to get use the magic wand tool, and I could keep going with that. I could keep holding down the shift key and I could tediously keep selecting all the different shades of red. I could try increasing the tolerance to see if I get more. But it's really tedious. It's going to take forever. And you can see I've accidentally got some white, so now I've got a problem. I'm really not getting just the red. So that tool's really not working. So we have another very powerful tool which is great to use called the Select Colour Range tool. And you'll find that is really useful for something like this. Colour range is much more sophisticated. If I just click now in that red area and increase the fuzziness, and I keep clicking, I've got a plus key there, so I can just keep adding things into the selection And it, because I might have slightly different shades of red, you can see that I can just keep adding them. I can also minus if I get the wrong thing. And you can see now as I click down here, I'm starting to add in all those little specks. And if I bring the fuzziness slider right up, I might just hide that, let me just cancel that and hide that layer for the moment, just so it's not confused. So select colour range and use that plus eyedropper. Like the eyedropper by itself will just get one colour, and then you use the plus icon to just keep adding bits of colour. If I go too far, I can go backwards or I can minus. So I want to be careful not to select the white background, but you can see how much more detail I'm getting. And if I drag that fuzziness slider up, you can see it's getting, if I drag it right up, you can see it's getting really nearly all the specks of red that she had. If I'm missing any, I could, zoom in and sort of try and get a couple more. So you tend to start to get the white. I think that's pretty good. If I say okay to that now, you can see actually it's done a great job. It's got nearly everything I wanted. And now again, remember it's got the selection, so I'm going to have to, I want the background, I'm going to have to select inverse. Now if I hit the delete key, I've got a lovely splatter with quite a lot of detail, and it's all sitting on that layer. Command D to deselect, move tool to move it around to get it in place, and I'll turn on the other bit, and now I can deal with the background. So remember, the aim at this point is to finish the illustration completely in Photoshop and then add your typography. Now because you've planned it and you've got your layer hopefully sitting next to you while you're doing this, you should be able to place all these different elements exactly where you wanted them in your design. And your design, because you did do all that laying out, you know exactly where the text is going to be, which is going to be probably produced in Illustrator, and so you'll know where to position things and how much space you need to leave for your title. The small stuff, the small type will be being added in InDesign. The title design should be done in Illustrator, or you might have taken the option of doing it by hand, in which case you'll be assembling it here in Photoshop. So for the background now, I can turn to that background layer, turn off, hide those top layers, and just put a different colour in to the background. So if I double click, I can select a colour for the background. Okay, whatever is that foreground colour, when I use the paint bucket, it's just going to tip a background colour in, turn on all my layers, and there's my background. So it looks like we've still got a little bit of something on that layer to get rid of. So I might have to do a little bit more work in that select colour range. I might have to go and sample whatever that is to try and get rid of it. When you're using that colour range, turn off everything else so you can just work on whatever it is you're wanting to get rid of. So you can see I've still got some kind of stuff happening there, and I'm not quite sure what that is. So I'd have to sort of do a little playing around to get rid of it. So with our colour range, we seem to have left some pixels on there still. Now some other possibilities. You did learn quite a little bit in your in your previous wrapping paper job about editing the colours. So with this, make sure you're on the layer you want to change. Just check what layer you're on. So now you can use those image adjustments. So if something isn't dark enough, you might go to the levels command and use the black point slider to make the colour intense. So as you can see for her sort of the blood layer there, I'll call it, I'm making that much more intense just by dragging up the black slider. So if you want to intensify a colour, you can see how much stronger that is. The levels is a good way to do that. or if possibly with a slide, you might, a scan, you might find it just came in a bit too faded, and going image adjust levels is a good way to address that. So you can see I can really intensify the blacks in those figures now. If it's not bright enough, you want to move that white point, and you can see that's going to increase the contrast within the figure there. So it does depend on your image as to what is going to be useful for you. And then remember, you do have the image adjust, all that stuff you learnt in colour theory. You've got your image adjust saturation. So if I actually want to change the colour of my blood splatter to bright blue, well, certainly I could do that for whatever reason I might have. Turn on that colour background, and remember you can also colorise if you want to make something just one colour. Saturation will obviously pull up or decrease the saturation of colour. So now I have a bright blue blood splatter, just because that's got a lot of contrast on the background. So remember those tools that you learnt, and in the case of those black figures, for example, I might want to use my colour replacement tool just on those figures. And one thing I'll just point out, which is important, if I want to protect that layer and just only affect the black figures, I can reselect my selection by holding down the Command key and clicking. See how it reselects my layer? So that means if I change the colour, I'm not going to be affected, or if I wanted to paint over it, I'm not going to be affecting, just going to change that to blue so you can maybe see it. I'll zoom up so you can see it. By reselecting my selection, I'm not going to go over the edges and accidentally change anything else. So you can see I can use that change colour tool quite effectively, whereas the image adjust saturation really wasn't doing much. So if I don't want to, particularly dark colours, you'll find that this can be quite an effective way of changing the colours rather than the hue saturation sliders. So don't forget about those tools. You did learn about them. And of course you could actually just straight out paint if you wanted to. And again, I could paint a little bit on there, and it's not going to go outside into other areas because I've reloaded the selection. So if I Command D and start to paint, you can see it's going to go everywhere. So that's a really powerful thing to remember. So I'll just do it again. You hover over the layer you want to reload. You're basically reloading a selection. Hold down the Command key, which is the one sitting next to your spacebar, and you'll see the little tool. It changes from just a hand to a little square icon, and you just click once and it reloads your selection. Magic. You can find the same thing in here, which is reload selection somewhere. I never use it, so look, there it is, load selection. So if you forget the shortcut, you can reload via the menu, but most people just learn to click on it and hold down the Command key. It's super fast, and you're doing it all the time. Once you get going in Photoshop, you're reloading selections. So Command D will reload any selection at any point and let you, I could hand paint and just sort of change a few random ones of these just because I want to. And I'm painting colour rather than, and remember that when I paint the colour, you can see I lose the texture. Okay, so that's why you want to use that colour replacement tool when you want to keep that wonderful texture that you've got, rather than just obliterating it by painting over it. So one more thing I'll just show you before I stop this recording. And Command D again. Learn that rather than having to go select and then deselect. Well, deselect is there. You can see the shortcut. Command D, just learn it because you're going to use it all the time. So learn Command D to deselect, and yes, you can load a selection if you're on that layer, it'll load it, or learn the shortcut, which is just to click on the little layer thumbnail and hold down the Command key. But Command D will deselect very quickly. One more thing to think about is layer overlays. You can have a lot of fun with those. that layer overlays are here. So they allow you to lay one layer over another, and it makes them interact with each other. So you can see how it's changing the way that splatter is interacting with all the other elements below it. So that can be quite a lot of fun, you know, if you want to play with that as well. So they're just things to explore, but that is another option for playing with imagery. So if you want something to overlay, you can see how that's changing it. It's just quite experimental, really. You can get some very, very interesting effects just by playing with the overlay. And remember, it's going to affect the one layer on top of the next layer. That's how it's going to overlay. So that's a good thing to play with. You also have opacity. So if you want to tone down the strength of a layer, you certainly can, whichever layer it is. You can change its opacity so it's a little more transparent. So I will stop here and take any questions, and also I'll stop the recording. Was there a question quickly? What was that?
When
I'll
you're free,
come
could you
and-
please come?
I'll come and help you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'll stop